I'm the assistant professor of art for Brenau University Center for the Arts and Design. Our original plan was to have an in-person event with workshops and um, a viewing of animated shorts, but with COVID and CDC recommendations, we had to come up with a more creative plan. But there was a silver lining that came out of it. We got some amazing guests today who took time off from their busy schedule to talk to us. And it's just so honored and privileged to speak with us virtually. Um, there's one sort of bad news I hate to break. Unfortunately, Joel Kuhara, president of production from Bento Box, couldn't make it tonight. But we still have an amazing industry leader from Bento Box speaking for us. And for those who are not familiar with Bento Box, it's an animation studio that created shows like Central Park, The Great North, and the Emmy award-winning series Bob Burgers. Please help me welcome head of animation talent development for Bento Box. And she also teaches at Cal Arts, Brooke Keesley.
Hi, and I have a room full of burgers, which have nothing to do with Bob's Burgers, but it's a good fit. Hello, everyone. So then everyone's gonna speak together, right? First, or do you want me to just blab? What do you want?
Yeah, just yeah, just start.
Wait, what about the other panelists? How does this work?
So they'll talk in order. So right after you, we'll have Sam speak, and then Jeff, and then Bernard, and then Ashley, and so.
Oh, okay, all right. And then how long do you want me to blather on for? And also, I don't see all the attendees, but can we do questions?
Yes. If there is a question that pops up, I'll happily direct that to you. So.
Okay. So I'm Brooke, and I am head of recruitment at Bento Box. We have a studio, 3 locations in LA, but it's all one studio. And then we also have a studio in Atlanta, Georgia, and we are always looking for animators. So whenever I speak to students, including my own students, I'm like, there is no better time on planet Earth to graduate in animation because there's so much work right now. It's unbelievable, right? My background is I have my MFA from Cal Arts. I made films and did what you all are doing. Do your students make films? Ish? Like animation tests, films?
So yeah, we do some animation in our digital arts classes. So, and we do graphic design. They do some type of motion graphics. We'll do special topics classes in animation. It's something we're looking at getting into a little bit more, but we're at the very beginning.
Yeah, that's okay.
As you say.
This is it's a new animation department, right? I didn't even really know that you had a department until you reached out.
We don't have an animation department yet.
Okay, yeah.
But we've got a few students who are specializing in animation. So
yeah, we have a graphics and digital arts concentration under studio art, and that allows us to do whatever we want. And in that line, I've had a student already graduate knowing how to use, she had taught herself Toon Boom. She taught herself Harmony. And so that's kind of what inspired the conversations about software, and that's kind of started to lead us in these different directions. And so it's where we're looking at, but we don't have a specific major yet. The hope is that we can develop a diving board, if you will, from the Studio Arts platform into storyboarding and backgrounds and the things that students can get jobs with.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's always, those students, like when I was at Cal Arts, there were people they're like, I want to do CG. And that was so new and we didn't have a lot of it yet. And Jorge Gutierrez did a whole student film in CG. And it was like, if you look at it now, it's like a little wonky compared to CG now, but it was great that he just did it. And I know right when I got there, they had just built this big space for us to do stop motion. But before that, there wasn't a real space for it. And people kind of just had to figure it out. So it's always like that in schools. So it's nothing to be apologetic for. It's just like, we're just like throwing as much at you as we can. And I will say that I've recruited for Cartoon Network, Disney TV, animation, Warner Brothers, and now Bento Box. I love being at Bento Box. we've almost doubled in size since COVID started. So we have hired a lot of people. I thought of Bento as a small boutique studio when I got there, and now we have more shows than we ever had at Cartoon or Disney when I was there. And I think of those as way bigger studios. So it's a really good time to get into animation. I will say that a lot of people that I recruit didn't study animation in school. We hire a lot of designers from illustration. We hire story people who have more like comics and graphic novels backgrounds. So I don't want anyone to feel like, oh, I didn't get enough out of school to get a job. Like you just, like school is just a starting point, and you just have to keep learning your whole life and keep improving your skills, right? So there's things that exist now that didn't exist when I was in school. Like I couldn't get a job at Giphy when I was graduating from school because Giphy didn't exist. Like, there was like Jif peanut butter, but there weren't GIFs. So, anyways, so we're always hiring. We look for people on the design side. So like entry level jobs on the design side might be like prop design or effects design. And then there's some people who do that their whole life. Like they love to be a prop designer and they stay doing that. So it's not like it's just a starting point. You can keep doing that. And then like I know a lot of people want to be a character designer right out of school, but that isn't usually an entry level job. Like you have to know how to do the turnarounds and make sure that the character is animatable. So you kind of learn some of that on the job, but that's another thing you can do. Color design is something we look for on the design side, and background design. So if you have good perspective knowledge, you could be a background designer. And then background paint. So if you don't like doing the perspective part, but you understand light and color, you could be a background painter. And then all of those people will kind of lead up to an art director who will oversee the look of the whole show. So that's kind of the design job side. And then on the story side, we look for storyboard revisionists, who are the people who would like kind of clean up the storyboard artist's work. And it's a really good way to learn how different storyboard artists work and how you might want to work when you become a storyboard artist, if you want to graduate to that step. And then, so it's storyboard revisions, then storyboard artists, and then assistant directors, supervising directors, on up. And then there's some people who go to art school and they're like, I thought I wanted to animate, but it's really intense and like labor intensive and not that fun. And I don't really love doing it, but I want to be around animation and I'm really organized and I'm a people person. So sometimes those people go onto the production side. So they start as like a PA, and then they can be a production coordinator, and then a production manager, and then associate producer, and then line producer. So those are kind of like 3 paths that one could take, and you don't have to stick to just one. Like sometimes people have, skills in all areas. There's also writers. We have shows, a lot of our shows at Bento are script driven. So the writers have a lot more creative say into how the stories go. And then we have some shows that are storyboard driven, which I would say more of our shows when I was at Cartoon Network were board driven. And that means that the storyboard artists do more of the writing of the dialogue and things like that. And so they'll have a bigger board team and a smaller writing team, whereas our shows, the script-driven shows, have a bigger writing team and a smaller boarding team, if that makes sense. And then we need editors. I mean, studios need all sorts of things. Like if, even if you were like, I want to work in a studio, but I don't want to work on the art side or production. Like maybe you want to go into like the accounting side. Like we have operations people. I mean, I always just like to say that because sometimes people don't know, like it just doesn't occur to them that we have all of these jobs to hire for. So we have IT people, we have people who are in charge of the pipelines, like just on the tech side, because everything is, like we're all working from home. We didn't miss one day of production because of the aforementioned brilliant Joel Kuwahara. Just like he set us up so well that when we went to COVID, it was just like the only thing people had to take time to do was to pop over and get their Cintiq from the studio. And, I just brought my laptop home because I just recruit all day. So, and I can look at portfolios from anywhere. So I look at portfolios and Instagram and Vimeo and YouTube. I'm just on all of the above all day. So that's kind of like an overall, but I don't know if there's any questions that people have just about specifically getting jobs in TV animation, or what we still call TV animation, even though it's all streaming. What is
Um,
TV?
well, I mean, I do have a question about portfolios. You mentioned portfolios. Like, what should go into a strong portfolio if you decide to go into animation, or even like if you want to be a writer
The
or
writing, writing is the hardest one for me to ever answer. I know a lot of writers who got their start, they became an executive assistant and they sat on someone's desk and, just kept nudging the executive that they were working with, like, hey, can I write a spec script for this show or that show? So the path to being a writer is a little bit less clear to me. I know people who've like smushed in from all different ways. I know in normal times, I go to theaters in LA, like the Upright Citizens Brigade Theater and like the Largo, and places where I would find maybe comedians who are writing their own material. And I know that that's how we find a lot of our voice actors too. But I'll sometimes approach people like, hey, have you ever thought about writing for animation type of thing? Um, a lot of them start as like PAs, like just entry level in production, and then find their way through the studio. And that's a thing that people do as well. But on the art side for portfolios, I would say try to not do like the whole I'll do anything thing and just like have like a buffet of things that we don't know like which thing you want to do. It's like a salad bar type of thing where we're like, I don't know what this person wants to do. Like, don't make me decide what you want to do. Try to know a little bit of what you want to do. Like, and it doesn't mean you only can do one thing. Like, I have students right now. We just had our portfolio day at CalArts yesterday, and some of them made, most of them made websites, and they had like a story portfolio in one tab and a design portfolio in another tab, like if they wanted to do both. It seems like most people I know kind of fall more into one than the other. Like they really are drawn to story, and like their design's okay, but like story is what they really want to do, or vice versa. Like they just love like making the world and making it beautiful and making the characters and the props and the colors that will support the story, but they don't want to make the story. And those are my students that have trouble finishing their films because I'm like, make a story that just like showcases your design is what I usually try to tell them, encourage them to do. But always put your best pieces in your portfolio. Don't feel like you have to fill it up with filler, and like, you want to put your best pieces forward so it catches our eye, because sometimes as recruiters, we only have sometimes just a few seconds to spend on a portfolio. Like I try to spend as much time with each, person's work and be respectful of it. But sometimes it's just like, hey, Brooke, we need a blah, blah, blah. And I'm just like, ah. Yeah, go ahead, Claudia. Sorry.
Yeah, I've got two questions right now. One, I think you might have already answered, but we'll go with it anyways.
Okay.
Are there any positions to look for if one loves to tell stories in a visual medium, but doesn't have the skill or demeanor for art/animation?
I would say writer. I mean, there are some people. There was a guy on Adventure Time, this guy, Kent Osborne, who's really funny and he's a great writer. Sam, you know him, right?
I do.
His brother was my teacher at CalArts, Mark Osborne, who directed The Little Prince and Kung Fu Panda. But they're very talented brothers, obviously. And Kent wasn't like a natural drawer, but he wrote and he kind of taught himself to draw. And his drawings were really charming. And for storyboards, like it's more important to show like the acting and like kind of nuances of what that character would be. So it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be the best artist on the planet, because it's just the storyboard is like a map for the animators. It's not going to be the final drawing. So he would just sit and like watch films and pause through films and like draw the frames as best he could. And I think that's part of, do you know any more about how he taught himself to draw, Sam? Like that's what I always heard from him.
No, not really. I think that's pretty close. Yeah, it's more just getting the expression down and yeah.
And his drawings are really, they have that kind of like outsider art, not like Henry Darger, but like they have like an outsider art charm to them that I really love. So Yeah, if you want to tell stories, you can find a way to do it, even if your drawings aren't the most beautiful. But writing is one way.
Oh, I have another question from a student. They ask, what exactly does the process look like, when you're recruiting from YouTube? Because you mentioned recruiting from YouTube, and what kind of YouTubers do? Um, oh no!
Well,
Oh,
for YouTube,
oh no.
Oh.
Sorry, wait.
Oh no, sorry.
Is that a different question?
No, I hit
went away,
answered on it.
away, but I just like you mentioned recruiting from YouTube. What does the process look like?
Well, it's just I work in talent development, which means recruiting for our current shows, and also I'm always looking for someone who might want to pitch to us. So I like to just look at what people are making, that like something that might stand out to me, like, wow, that person's amazing. Like, so sometimes I'll reach out to someone saying, hey, have you thought about pitching to us, or to any animation studio, and we'll set up a general meeting with them. You can't just write to a studio, like never send an unsolicited pitch to a studio. Like what we have to do is we have to delete it. First, we have to send it to our legal department, then we delete it, and then we tell the person like, hey, I had to delete your pitch because it was unsolicited. So there's just like legal ramifications. So you always want to make sure that you have been invited to pitch, or you reach out and say, hey, I have something to pitch, and then we'll send you like an NDA or some kind of paperwork to sign before you pitch. Or a really good way to go about that is to have representation. So if you want to pitch your own show someday, but that doesn't normally happen to people right out of school, although right now animation is so in demand that it's probably happening a little bit more right now than normal. But so, I mean, I look at YouTube for, just animation reels as well. So I look for all of the above. I hope that answered that.
Oh, and then we've got another question. What internships are available for those who are like not really sure what they want to do, but still want to find something to help them decide?
At the moment with COVID, we are not doing internships, unfortunately. When I've run internships in the past, I've really liked to make sure that we do lunches with our interns, and I always bring in special guests. And it's just we're all so busy that I don't think that we can offer like the most amazing internship while COVID is happening. But once we get back to normal, whatever that's going to look like, we'll try to have internships again. They are helpful, and I know some studios are starting to offer them again. So if you can get them at any studio, it's helpful. I started as an intern on Hey Arnold at Nickelodeon. And I was just basically like free labor because they didn't pay interns then. And they gave me some Nick at Night swag, which was cool. But I had to work at Trader Joe's at night and on weekends to pay for like being there 40 hours a week. But it really helped. I'm still friends with so many of the people that I was an intern. Like I met Kelly Cruz at Cartoon Network and Ryan Slater. And when I got my job years later as a recruiter, I remember being walked around the studio by this woman named Linda Barry, who was like well known and loved at Cartoon Network. And they were like, she's like, this is Kelly Cruz. I'm like, Kelly Cruz, I worked for you on Hey Arnold. So I will say, be nice to the people that you work with as an intern or at work, because like animation is just a snow globe, and you like shake it up and all the little flakes, like one day they're at Disney, then they're at Nickelodeon, then they're at Bento Box. Like we're all just in the snow globe together. So be nice to each other, because you're going to encounter the same people over and over again.
We have a few minutes left, Brooke, but I've got a question. Like, when submitting a portfolio, is it a good idea to have a balance of hand-drawn items or like digital, or what's like sort of the balance, or can you just get away with just all hand-drawn items?
Well, for us, I would say, because we do pretty much everything digitally, it's good to show, like, I love to see people's life drawings and their hand-drawn things and their comics, and you'll get different answers from different recruiters on this question, but I love seeing people's process drawings as well. So, I would say make sure that you read the job description for any job that you're applying for. I can put I'll put our our site in the chat so people can even just look at what the job descriptions ask for and make sure that you kind of have all of those things. We get a lot of people applying for things that they have, they don't have the experience for the job. Like if it's an entry level position, we'll be clear about that. But just one thing I've told people to do in the past, which might be helpful, is look at the credits or look at IMDb and see who's doing the jobs that you want to do in the future, and look at what their online presence is and look at their portfolio, because that can be really helpful, just to see how other people are presenting their work. Sometimes artists are so busy working from job to job to job that they don't update their portfolio because they're just like, they're in demand and they're so busy. But a lot of times people do have a good presence, and even just have an Instagram just for your art. And make sure, this is so basic, but make sure that your email address is really easy to find, because there's sometimes that I'm trying to find an artist, like I've found their work, and I've DM'd them and they don't answer me. And I'm like, or they'll have that thing on their website that's like, if you'd like to contact me, and you have to fill out this whole form. And I'm like, if you just had an email address, I could contact you by emailing you. So, and then it's not my favorite, but LinkedIn is really useful. It's not pretty, but it's a thing to definitely keep up. I know like you don't think of that for arts, but I'm on it a lot too. And we post a lot of our jobs on LinkedIn. So, and then once you start working, like say your first job is at Bento Box, and like on your LinkedIn, you don't want to just put from 2021 to 2023. You want to say like, I was on Duncanville as storyboard artist, and then I was on, Paradise PD as background paint. Like put the things that you actually do on your LinkedIn, not just like the studio name and how long you were there, because it's like a living resume that you can kind of keep updating. And it's really helpful for recruiters to kind of know like, oh yeah, okay, this person was, background design on DC Superhero Girls. And we have this new show at Bento that's kind of like an action show. So we know that they could probably do that style or whatever. So I hope that makes sense.
No, thank you. Just be flexible, and depends on what position you're applying for. So thank you.
Yeah, and definitely apply to the Atlanta studio if you want to animate. We do a lot of, how most TV studios send out their animation to Korea and Canada, and sometimes Ireland, with all the animation going on there, and different studios in different countries are picking up a lot of animation now. But we do a lot of our own animation at our Atlanta studio. So if you learn Toon Boom Harmony, like there's a lot of jobs right now in that, if that's what you want to do.
Well, thank you so much. I know you've got classes to teach at CalArts, so
yeah,
it's an honor to have you. And,
I'm sorry to bail. I'd love to hear from everyone, but I have so much work to do before my class starts.
It's okay, Brooke. We'll make sure you get I can send you a link so you can see the cloud reporting. And I wanted to tell all the panelists that we do have 47 attendees, because I don't too often see that. So you are talking to people.
Yeah, that's great. All right, well, have a beautiful day, everyone. And I'm sorry I'm missing everyone speaking, but I'll hopefully catch up with you in the real world, IRL.
Yay,
Bye. Bye, Brooke.
Bye, Brooke. All right. So next up, our next guest, we actually went to school together in South Carolina. And so we actually met a few times at school, but I think we met more during when I worked at that comic shop, Acme Comics.
Yeah.
And I'm also a fan of your comics. I've got some of your comics here.
Oh my God.
So, yeah.
Dude. Too nice.
In addition to writing comics, you're also a storyboard artist for shows like Regular Show, Close Enough, and Infinity Trade. And also you also had a short based on one of your original stories. And so I'd love to hear a little bit about that too. But yeah, please welcome Sam Smita. Thank you, Sam, for coming today.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, thanks for having me. Yeah, I do boards for Cartoon Network. I'm actually doing freelance for DreamWorks right now. So yeah, like what Brooke said, you're always kind of like bouncing around. And I was actually, it's funny because I was like bugging Brooke about a job like a month ago. So um, yeah, animation it's like pretty tough to break into, but once you're in, it's like very everybody's helping each other and very welcoming and stuff. Getting like I'll just like briefly talk about my path and journey into
Yes, please,
animation.
please, please.
Yeah, so yeah, like we said, we went to school together. I went to school for graphic design. Were you a design major also?
Yeah, I was actually in sculpture ceramics, but
Oh, cool.
I did a little bit of stop motion, and so I was bugging what's his name who did the who worked the production department. I forget his
Jimmy.
name. Jimmy, yes. So I would bug
Oh,
Jimmy for like, hey, can I use the computers or cameras, and because I want to animate some of my figures, and so yeah.
oh, that's awesome.
Mhm.
Yeah, so yeah, in school, I mean, like growing up and everything, I always loved drawing and I was always coming up with characters and I love coming up with stories and stuff like that. But I always felt like an artist, but I didn't know what I wanted to do. So when college came around, I tried to do illustration and that wasn't working out. So I went into graphic design and really fell in love with graphic design and typography and everything. And it was like towards the end of college where in one of our classes we had an illustration class and we had a comic book assignment and I did my first little like 4-page comic and I like totally my world opened up. There was like a I discovered indie comics and mini comics and zines and stuff like that. And Acme was like a small store in our hometown that sold like mini comics, and I had never seen anything like that before. And it was like from that point forward, I had like found my calling almost. Like it's like all my interests rolled up into one thing, which is like drawing and writing and like even doing like little crafty stuff of making books. And I brought some examples. We already showed some, but like yeah, like for the next like 5 years or so after school, I just um, dedicated my life solely to like making little like stapled mini comics and stuff like that. This was like my very first one, and you can see how like awful the drawings are. But I think just uh, um, like I really like focused all of my creative energy on just making as many little stories and comics as I possibly could and while trying to like find a graphic design job and that wasn't happening, so I was a waiter for a really long time and I would travel all over the place to go to comic book shows and sell my zines and stuff like that. And I eventually met some recruiters like Brooke at a comic show in San Francisco, and they were talking about pitching shorts and shows to Nickelodeon, and I was like, what are you talking about? Like the thought of working in animation like never ever crossed my mind. It just seemed like this impossible dream job, like being an astronaut or something. Like nobody actually works in animation. But yeah, once I started meeting people and seeing how they're so friendly and so welcoming and like really encouraging, like I'm sure if you emailed Brooke, she would like email you back and answer any questions and talk about your portfolio and everything. Like I had this image of like Hollywood and these like cold cutthroat executives and everything, but it's a really awesome small community. So
I was
anyways,
gonna say this. I'm sorry
oh
to
no no no.
I just wanted to say like it just I find it's a weird coincidence. Like a lot of your work sort of is similar to like a lot of the character design, the styles to some of the shows, and it's just like, was that just a big coincidence, or like did someone like come to you and say, hey, I like your style, like come work for this show, and I think we can really work well. And so like was can you talk a little bit about that? So
Yeah, it is pretty wild. So yeah, like I said, I was very diligent about sending my mini comics to stores all over the country, and in doing so, like sending packages to like the New York like Forbidden Planet comic shop and all these different comic shops all over the country that carried mini comics. Um, oh, there's probably what's that record shop in Little Five Points in Atlanta? They have mini
I forget
comics
I
and
forget, it's been a while.
Is it Criminal
I
yeah,
know you're
Records?
so criminal records. Yeah, they definitely probably have some of my mini comics like in some dusty heap somewhere. But I would like mail my stuff out everywhere, and there's a shop in LA called Meltdown that's not around anymore, but
Oh yeah,
I had my mini comics in there, and animation people shop there, and JG Quintel, the creator of Regular Show, just picked up one of my mini comics one day and just emailed me out of the blue because I always put my email in my mini comics, and offered me a storyboarding test, which is how people um, kind of vet and see if you would be a good fit for the show. And I like got this email out of the blue by somebody that works in animation, was like totally blown away, and did this test, like spent a week doing this like storyboarding test, and sent it back to him. And like I honestly did not hear back from Regular Show for like 2 years. And then it was just like a foregone conclusion. I was like, that was crazy when that Regular Show guy emailed me. And then 2 years later, they were like, hey, we got a spot open. You want to join? Like you could start in 2 weeks. I'm like, what are you talking about? So I really randomly found my way in. But once I was in the system, I guess I could kind of see that like you were saying, my work has kind of been like leading up to storyboarding. Um yeah, I guess I was just like influenced more by cartoons than I thought I was. But yeah, like what Brooke was saying, like um I see a lot of students make portfolios where they try to do everything, but I feel like if you do like specialize in like what you would actually want to do, it would be really helpful. So for me, it's like I I do boards on like comedy driven shows. So, I made like a ton of like comics that kind of are, similar in tone, and they're jokey and stuff like that. But I could talk a little bit about storyboarding in general. It's if do your students know like the basics of boarding, or?
yeah, a little bit, but please, yeah, I mean, continue with storyboarding.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, so storyboarding, it's pretty much just like the blueprint for the animation studio. So you're doing like all the really rough like keyframe drawings that they're going to it's kind of like pacing out the episode early on. So on my first show that I was on, Regular Show, it was board driven. Brooke talked a little bit about this. So the board artists were kind of the writers also. um, so we would get outlines that are just like 3-page, like typed up like this, of just like kind of the structure of like what happens in the episode. And then me and another storyboard artist would go through and write out the whole episode, or like script it out and then draw it. And we actually drew everything on Post-it notes. So this is one of my storyboards for Regular Show. It's all just like tons of Post-it notes, and you could
Really cool.
see how they're not just like beautiful drawings or anything. They're pretty loose. And yeah, so then let me show you in contrast to a scripted show. Can I share my screen? Would that break anything? Oh no, you disabled screen sharing. Oh, that's okay.
Hold on, I think
You now have privileges.
Oh, cool. Yeah, so this is my storyboard for one of my Apple and Onion episodes, a Cartoon Network show. I'll just like flip through it quickly. But yeah, it's just like the keyframes for the animators to go off of. Yeah, so should I, do you want to
Hey,
get some
Sam, I'd
questions?
like to ask you something about this. How often is it possible for you to be working with the audio as well at the same time?
Yeah, thanks, Jeff.
Sure.
So yeah, when we're doing like on Post-it notes, of course, there's no audio. But on this show, sometimes we would get an audio track that we would have to board to. So we would either get a script and just like board out what we think the actors are gonna act like, but then sometimes we would get like the full audio recording and put it into Storyboard Pro and board from the track. Which this episode I didn't, but on a couple I have, whether it's like special songs and dance numbers and stuff like that.
Right, especially when we get music or something, it really helps to be able to have the audio to play with. I know, working on our shows, a lot of times we don't get, they're recording while the boarders are boarding. So sometimes it's more about just the language of the show, or, I didn't mean to stop your presentation at all.
No.
I thought I was trying to just add to it in that, you sort of are looking more at the picture as a whole, as getting your compositions, your layouts, the feeling done, and we left the acting away for a minute because we knew, John H. Benjamin, who's going to come in there and do Archer, will give a completely different, take than we thought as storyboarders. So we usually just sort of, get the foot, like you say, it's a total footprint with storyboard. So it's interesting to see the variations of how to create just the blueprint,
Yeah, that's really interesting. How I always wondered how you guys added that, because they improvise a lot of their lines. So that's just a lot of retakes, I would guess, after it's animated.
Absolutely. Well, no,
Yeah.
not after it's animated. We just have a lot of retakes once we get an edit. So we, and we've had the luxury recently of doing some work with the audio. And so it does really, the storyboarders get really excited to be able to have the audio because they can start acting, and so much of the time we have to wait for the acting after everything's sort of compiled in an and the first loose rough animatic.
Yeah, that is something that I was going to talk about, where there's like that famous quote where it's like, you can't teach experience, so it's like, as much as you try to like make the best portfolio possible, like you're not really learning until you're actually doing it, which is like kind of a bummer, because it's such like every show that you're on is like so completely different, and it's such a new learning experience. And for me, like, it was so huge to see my first episodes come back animated and see like, oh my God, I really should add more acting poses because they're like standing still for a long time, or you can just tell that like the perspective on this is like a little wonky. Like, you really learn on the job for sure. So
Sam, I've got a couple questions.
yeah.
So the storyboard that you just showed, how long did it take to develop the visual story?
That's another thing. Like, every show is super different. At Cartoon Network, it seemed I worked on 4 different shows at Cartoon Network, and it was all pretty much the same schedule. We had 5 weeks to do an episode, and um, actually, I made some. I'll link to it, but I've made some comics about working on different shows. I made a comic on like what it's like to work on regular show, and I like really just go through like all the technical, like, on week 1 we do this, on week 2 we do this, because there's like pitches in the process, and you start doing like thumbnails the first week and get a bunch of notes, and then have to redraw a bunch of stuff, and eventually like clean it up and hand it in. But yeah, 5 weeks for these shows.
And then what's your normal work week like? Showing off your best work or stories.
Totally. Yeah, I think in one of, I'll try to find I'll link to them when I'm not speaking, but in some shows or some weeks, it's like I am so focused and I barrel through like 6 script pages, and I'm like really on, in my zone. But then there's other days where I'm just like totally cannot do anything. So it really depends on the show too, like how long you've been on it. This last show that I was on, Apple and Onion, it was more like a steady stream of work. So I did keep more like regular work hours. But yeah, back in my like regular show days, I was like, I was like stressing all day, like thinking about how I could like possibly draw this like epic space fight that I have to draw. It's like I have no idea. Just like doing like little thumbnails in my sketchbook and freaking out, and then like working all night to get through. But yeah, it really depends from show to show, and kind of what you're expected to do from show to show also changes. Like if you are boarding to an audio track, you're doing a lot of timing and stuff. On other shows, you're doing like mostly writing. Um, yeah.
And then one last question. What's easier, storyboarding with audio or without?
It's just very different. I mean, I think it really depends on who you're working for. If they want like tons of poses, very clean drawings, or if they're just like, hey man, just like get the gesture down and that's good enough. A lot of bento box shows are like you look at those storyboards and it looks like the show. They're like very clean, perfectly on model. But yeah, on regular show, you can see like these drawings are like really wonky. And actually, JG, the creator of the show, had like um, this philosophy of maybe like a touch messed up, but he kind of like he liked the looser drawings because they're more expressive and it kind of gives the animation studio more room to like it's like if you give them this perfect storyboard and they're just tracing it,
Mhm.
maybe you won't get the best work back. But if they like see this thing where it's more about like the idea of what they want the scene to look like, then they like gives puts more not pressure on them, but more like creative input on them to
Mhm.
churn out the work that he was looking for.
And I guess this is more of a personal question, but have you ever second guessed your career at one point, especially due to stress?
Y- well, not yes and no, because it's storyboarding is a very stressful job, and like really what I love to do is like make these like silly like mini comics and stuff like that. But these like spending 3 months making like a 30-page book and selling it for $3, you can't make a living off of that. So there are times where I wish, like, when I'm like beating my head against the wall on like this impossible scene, and like I keep getting this note to like change it a million times. I'm like so over this episode or whatever. Um, I definitely have times like, man, I wish I could like just focus on my mini comics and like be a waiter again or something. But then it's like, oh my God, what am I talking about? So no, I'm extremely grateful for my job, and
Awesome.
as hard as it is, it's very rewarding.
I have a question. It's more for about Infinity Train. And so you worked on that show, and you got the chance to like read some of the script, but like that show, it's pretty dark. And I was wondering if sort of the story and tone sort of took a toll on you when you were like storyboarding or reading the script.
Yeah, Infinity Train is awesome, and they actually just announced that they're getting a book 4 today.
Yeah.
I saw that HBO, so I'm pumped about that. But yeah, I worked on the first 2 series of that, and it is like a more cinematic show than I'm used to, so a lot more dynamic camera angles and stuff like that. But the creator of the show worked on regular show. He was a coworker and knew that my like strength was in humor and like funny facial expressions and stuff like that. So he would he paired me up with somebody who really liked the darker stuff and the more like sentimental parts. And when we would get our episodes, we would split it to where she would generally take like the crazy fight scenes and I would take
Mhm.
like the more like funny goofy stuff.
Okay.
um so yeah, the people that hand you the episodes are considering who they're giving it to.
Okay. Because yeah, like it talks. There's some like talking about like the afterlife and death, and I was like, oh wow. And so I thought maybe like that took a toll on you like mentally, because like you wrote a comic book about death, and I thought maybe that was some sort of connection um, with that,
Uh,
and so
yeah, that was more about politics, but yes.
gotcha. But
Yeah, I wrote a comic about working on Infinity Train specifically that I'll link in the chat in a second.
awesome, thank you. And then I guess one last question. It's about Infinity Train. Was that studio any different in the boarding process?
Yeah, so that was the first scripted show that I was on. Um, so that was a little bit different. Um, but yeah, it was still Cartoon Network. It was still a 5-week cycle, and we still had like 2 weeks to work on a thumbnail, pass, and then pitch it to everybody, and then get a bunch of notes, and then we would have like a week and a half to do another pass and get another pile of notes, and then clean it up for a week and then hand it in. So similar and different.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Let's see.
Hey, Sam, whenever you share things on the chat, make sure that you switch it to panelists and attendees.
Oh, got it.
Thank you.
Cool. Yeah, I feel like I'm kind of all over the place in this talk. I wrote out notes, but I can never really like look at them. But yeah,
No,
if anybody wants to like
you touched
email
on
me or
great points. So thank you so
oh,
much.
cool. But yeah, just like if anybody had any specific questions, like feel free to email or Twitter DM or Instagram DM, whatever. I'm very open. I'll look at your portfolios or whatever you want.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that. Oh yeah, I I I I did the mistake of DMing you on Instagram, and you're like, oh, go email me on Gmail, my Gmail. I was like, okay. So
Yeah, be careful
Well,
what you ask for, Sam. You might end up, reviewing portfolios.
hey, I'll review 41 attendees' portfolios.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll put your name down.
Sure.
Okay.
well, thank you, Sam, for speaking us with today. Just want to sort of transition to our next speaker.
Thank you.
Our next speaker, we had a chance to talk about his mug collection, and that let me know that he got a chance to sort of travel the world, and let me know that he's working on a software that's world renowned. And so and then you got to see some of it in Sam's work when he was showing the storyboard. Our next guest works for Toon Boom Harmony, Bernard Botoy.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here and with this illustrious company. I'm a fan of all the projects that these studios work on. I've been working for Toon Boom going on 10 years now, and I've had the pleasure of either working with the North American studios at one point. I've taken over the Asian Pacific market for the past 5 years. And last year I transitioned into education, and really, I really love working within this field. I do not have a talent. I am not an artist in any way, shape, or form. So every time I see a show, I'm in awe. Sam's work is, just looking at the boards and going, my God, he just sits there and he has to think about these things. It's just insane. And I've had the pleasure of, and I'm a fan of animation. As a kid growing up, I think the first love of my life was Johnny Quest. I think it was the theme more than anything else. But that was just something that just really pulled me in. And then, you kind of go into Transformers during my teen years. And I've had a privilege over the course of my career with Toon Boom to meet a lot of the great artists. I've sat in Miyazaki's office and realized that while every other studio in Japan is looking at the Japanese comic books, he was looking at everything that Disney had. Every video, every storybook, every picture book. Or I was speaking with a gentleman in Korea who, over the course of his career, has worked with Chuck Jones, has on Bugs Bunny. He has gone on to work for a movie company and inadvertently created iconic swords that are still used today by taking his scalpel and scratching out these swords and then coloring them in with a little blue and red paint and then cleaning them up and creating lightsabers for George Lucas on top of 32 years of working for The Simpsons. And, it is just such a magical industry to be in. It's a lot of work. it's a lot of precision. And my job for Toon Boom as a sales director now for education is to support each one of the studios, not just in North America, but globally, because animation, as was mentioned before, is very much like a James Bond movie. A lot of exotic locations. Your project might start off in Los Angeles or Canada or wherever the case may be, but it's going to jump nations. And you know what's great about it is even in COVID, there is no ceiling. And as indicated before, we're in this beautiful platinum age of animation, where within the past 6 months, my team and I, my counterparts, we sit down and talk about all the studios and their projects and what they need. And my job is to go to get to the high schools and colleges and universities to make sure that they're kind of up to date on the technique and that they can align with what is happening in the industry. And the industry is changing on such a rapid pace. You know, when you go back 5 years ago, or when I started with Toon Boom 10 years ago, the majority of the shows were hand drawn or flash. There was some cutout that was coming in. Now it's to a point, thanks to Netflix and Disney and all these guys, you're seeing greenlit projects come out from everywhere. There's 500 new series that are being greenlit that we've discussed internally at Toon Boom since September. And it's insane because as much as the creativity that goes to create these great shows, every studio needs the talent to be able to do it. And you know, even how the timing change for delivering a series has come in from that of a hand drawn to now what Netflix is asking for, where you almost have to deliver an episode a month, which is insane, which means you've got to take on a different technique to do the animation by way of cutout or hybrid animation. So it is a rapidly changing market, and it's, you know, from my job to help the schools align with what is happening and get the teachers to be able to teach the techniques and using the tools that the industry uses to make the studio's jobs easier. Because it is and based off the conversations I've had with many studios over the years, is the biggest headache that a studio has is when you get these beautiful talent that's coming in, and then they got to be retrained and they have to learn how to work in a studio. Unless I'm mistaken, Jeff, is that about right?
No, that's about right. Yeah. I mean, I prefer to have somebody knowing the software, but something like looking at Sam's work on with the Storyboard Pro, if somebody knows Photoshop, and has done some sort of node animation, you know, some sort of node program,
Yeah.
I can probably teach them fairly quickly how to work in that program. So, even working in like Harmony, if they're 3D people that want to go back to 2D and they're used to a Maya situation where you're working in the nodes, it's sort of like I can kind of I can nudge you towards the Harmony, even if you're in 3D, because you're sort of you understand the language. You're at least have the alphabet, you know, to be able to move forward. So yeah, I would agree.
And you know, and one of the things when I'm working with many of the universities, the goal is to build ecosystems and an educational pathway for many of the students to start off at the high school level, start learning the principles of animation, the tools and the techniques that are being used, so that they can go forward into college, into university, and start, you know, getting some of the more finesse out of the storytelling. And there's so many great schools around the world that are teaching animation, and it's just a really phenomenal industry to be in. But the challenges do align. I mean, people have to understand, and I'm talking to the students who are on this, that you got to be job ready. more than anything else. You're coming out, and the goal that comes in is understanding that tool, understanding the vision, and working within the vision and fitting in as a team. I was part of a conversation earlier today with a couple of artists who spoke about their experience when they were getting hired and going through the interview process. And this one gentleman was talking about his first interview, and he was nervous. He goes, "Oh, I'm going for this studio. It's a legendary studio." And he was looking at his portfolio, and his portfolio, he goes, it's not the greatest thing. And he was looking at a guy next to him who had his portfolio ready, and it was like awesome. But the guy seemed just a little bit off. And when he found out that he got the job, and he goes, "Yeah, but this guy was next to me was so wonderful. What happened?" He goes, the guy goes, "He wouldn't fit in the team. He was too much of independent, and he kept interrupting, and he wasn't listening to the questions that were being asked, and it couldn't be a fit." So it's more than just learning about the technology and the technique. It's being able to fit into the environment of a team. Animation is not a one person job. It's that whole group of talent that is working on, Archer or a regular show. You're working with a team environment, and you have to be able to fit in. However, with that said, there are jobs available around the world. You could be sitting in Atlanta, and you finished a project for Bento, and you're in between jobs, and suddenly you see a job posting in India. You can actually get a job working for a studio overseas. You can cut your teeth on that. There's many studios internationally that are looking for people who understand the Western style of technology. Animation is growing, and because of those streaming guys, they're commissioning work for countries like India and Malaysia, and I got this big map in front of me, so I'm looking at the country that are going to be taking, bringing in and playing that platform or that streamer in their countries. And not everyone's going to watch Mickey Mouse. I don't know why not. It's the greatest mouse out there. And they have to have their own shows to fit in as well. And it's a very tough job because they don't have the same animation technique as we have here in North America or in Europe. So you have a great opportunity once you get your experience and your knowledge to start cutting your teeth overseas, because there's a lot of experience you can grab there and reapply it here, and you can make a great living working in this industry. It's absolutely phenomenal. Am I missing anything?
So far
I see
you've done
Louise like,
so
no.
far you've done pretty well. How about dig into some Storyboard Pro?
Storyboard Pro, that is the key. that Storyboard Pro. Harmony does do a lot of the digital traditional animation, the cutout, hybrid. You can import the 2D, 3D. But when you get to the Storyboard Pro, that is the skeleton key. You can, use that tool to work on a animated series, a feature film, a television series. You can do medical animation. You can do engineering. The military itself uses a lot of Storyboard Pro to previs any military event or sortie that they want to do. They have to plan everything out because you're dealing with people's lives, you're dealing with crew, you're dealing with military, and they have to get a true picture. And the best thing about our software, it is 2D within 3D space. So you can actually grab an FBX or an OBJ model, drag it and drop it into the software and animate around it. And you're getting full cameras. So if you have an idea for, I don't know, your student project, and you want to start working on a game, and you need to get a visualization of what that concept is. And the best thing about storyboarding and being able to run that animatic is it's not just to see how the show looks, but how it feels. Because it's like food. You can see that picture of a nice chocolate cake, but until you eat that cake, you don't know how it makes you feel. With animations, the same thing with a storyboard. I've seen some stuff that are I've actually seen some high school kids who are working on a project in Canada. One group was they did their beat boards, they've ran their animatics for their storyboard, and there's one of them which was so good, almost cried. It was just beautiful. It was like a 2 minute and 30-second piece. It was on death, and it was humorous. It was a cartoon, but the way that his animatic was, I didn't need to see the finished product. It was already touching me. And I've also seen some back in the day, some Family Guy storyboards, and I'll tell you, they were just as funny. You knew, and this is what, for me, anyways, is the key, because once you can get people to feel it, once you get that finished product, you know it's going to be awesome, because that storyboard hit it each and every time, got the beats, got everything timed out. So, and there's a huge demand, as Claudia, we mentioned earlier this evening. So it's quite interesting, and being able to work with schools that can teach that and understand that technology to help get the students to work, I think is great.
Can I hop in and just say one more time that Storyboard Pro is very straightforward. I feel like, especially if you know like Adobe products, like you can hop in pretty easy and set the same hotkeys and everything, and it's very intuitive.
Can I get
Well,
one
and then knowing one or the other. Oh, I'm sorry.
well, it's okay. At some point, can I get one of you guys to like turn storyboard on and like give us a quick, like, this is what it looks like?
Well, before you do that, I have one question from the audience.
Just one?
Well, there's a few, but how is animation studios differ from North America in comparison to a place like Japan?
Oh, okay. That's a great question. Um, North America and Europe are very modern on how they do their animation. North America is quite very businesslike, very creative. It is the bar, really, for what is seen around the world. Everyone outside of the U.S. wants to have the next Simpsons, wants to have the next Bob's Burgers. They look at these shows and they go, how do we get that? How do we get that success? Europe is very artsy. Europe has this vision. They're very fluid. Their animation is beautiful, but it's not, from my personal view, it doesn't hit the mark. In Japan, Japan is at a crossroads. Japan, many of the studios over there have signed these huge contracts with Netflix. Now, what's nice about Japan, it is the most advanced technological society in the world until it comes to animation. Everything's still done on paper, to a point that they have these guys that will, in the morning, get up, get on a bike, get all these envelopes, bike to these people's houses, hand off the envelopes. Everyone will work on their light table. Same guy will come at the end of the day, pick up all the files, and then bring them back to the studio. And there will be this poor guy who's standing in front of a scanner and just lifting, put it on a sheet, close it, scan, lift it. And that's his job all day long, is to scan in these images. And now they're at a point where, thanks to Netflix and their demand to have episodes delivered in 4 and 8K, excuse me, 4 and 8K, you can't do it with hand-drawn shows anymore, because it doesn't look right. So Japan is being forced to transition to digital. The only difference is, instead of going paperless, they've decided that they're going to go full cutout, which for that society is a huge jump, because they don't have the experience and the knowledge to do that. We're working with 4 or 5 studios out there, but they do have a lot of great 3D, and they do a lot of toon shading over there. And if you've seen the Godzilla series, which is fantastic, the way it's not Production IG. I can't remember the studio that was behind it. It's fantastic. So they can understand the concept from going from 3D and taking a 2D rig, building a rig, working with the node views. They seem to get that, but it's that transition to go from paper to paperless. For them, they go, no, that doesn't work. We got to go full cutout. We want to go, and it's not even simple cutout. It's full 3D, full 360 rigs, similar to that of Tangled, which, to my knowledge, is the bar of what is done. When you take a look at that particular series that is done for Disney, the studio behind that is Mercury Filmworks. They really did a job that every studio overseas really wants to hit that mark. And one of the things that is needed for that is someone who understands the concept of rigging and building character rig. Did I answer the question? Sorry, it was a little long.
You definitely, wow. That was
Sorry.
intense. I mean, just recently I watched what you call the new movie from Studio Ghibli, I think Earwig and the Witch, and it was like 3D animated. It was weird. So it was a weird adjustment going from like your traditional, Miyazaki film into like this 3D animated. You're like, I mean,
That's his son Guru. Guru's trying to build his own name. Now, you can't have the last name Miyazaki and
Mhm.
everyone expects you to do your father's work. When we were there, I was there three years ago when he started working on that project, and he goes, "I'm going 3D." Yeah, it's Japan is awesome. Any other questions?
Let me see. How many animators or animator studios have you worked estimately, not in states?
Okay, well, it's an interesting number because we know that there's over 4,000 studios within the Western world. Tokyo itself Tokyo prefect has about 800. China itself has about 4,000 official studios. Unofficially, there's about 20,000, and it's growing. We're seeing new markets. Toon Boom. We're very fortunate to be working with 135 countries around the world, and there are growing markets, growing stories. When I was dealing with Thailand, that market is 3D. It was 3D, 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 3D. And a few years ago, one of the studios decided that they were going to do a 2D show. And at one point, we're going, okay, well, do you need help? Nope, we're going to do this on our own. We just need the licenses, and we sold them licenses. We were at there's a big trade show in Korea, and suddenly this studio comes out and they're playing their show. And it was, what was it called? Sea Love. Yeah, Sea Love, I think it was called. And everyone went crazy for it because it was a whole new voice, a different direction, to a point where this studio, the Monk Studio, started getting bids from Nickelodeon, Netflix, Amazon, Hulu, and he was just getting bids galore. They never worked on a 2D series. Now the guy's background is he used to be a former executive over at Rhythm and Hues in Asia, which he knew how to tell a story and he knew how to do a lot of the effects in there. But we're seeing stuff that's coming out of Africa and other countries where you don't really imagine animation really taking hold, and they're telling their own stories. And I think that's really important. I know Disney Asia is doing a very doing a very important thing where they are trying to get stories specific from APAC. And these have to be local flavor, has to be boarded, written, animated, all within the region, but they want to get it to fall on the same level of their other productions. And some of the stories are absolutely charming. You know, these are they're trying not to work with a folklore. They're trying to create, you know, their own, you know, next version of a classic animated animation story, and it's really brilliant on what we know. South America is growing left, right, and center. Mexico for talent. If you speak Spanish and you understand how to do animation with our technology, there's tons of jobs in Mexico, and it's just growing, and to a point where Mexico is stealing talent from a lot of the Latin American countries. So, you know, this industry is just growing, and you never know what you're going to see. And, you know, one of my favorite shows that I've been watching lately, which started off as a webtoon, going to Sam's thing about a comic book, is a series called Kingdom, which is on Netflix. And it is a beautiful, beautiful shot, live action series with colorful costumes and horses and swords and zombies. And it's just fantastic, but it's coming out of Korea, and it fits with everything that's being done within the Netflix scope of programming. So yeah, and I believe they're boarding it in Storyboard Pro on top of it.
And then I have a question. They're asking if you have any connections with studios in Ireland, specifically Cartoon
We do.
Salon.
My colleague Daniel, who takes care of Europe and Asia and Africa, I think he has half the world. He has a lot of tight relationships with the studios in Ireland, and Ireland is again a country that had 2, and now they're up to 10 animation studios, and they're growing. It's incredible to see. There is going to be there's no ceiling to what's coming out now because everyone's just consuming. I can't wait for Expanse to come back. I consumed all that as fast as it came out. And now I'm out of a series. So I can fully understand. I want more.
Well, thank you, Bernard. Wait, hold on. We've got another one. So how are these jobs holding up in the pandemic? Has the pandemic put any jobs at risk or discontinued? I guess this is for like some of the, like all the animators or industry folk as a whole, I guess.
On my end, from what I've heard from my colleagues, and even at the beginning of this presentation, no, everyone, the Canadian studios up here are doubling in size. I know the US studios are growing because there's just so much content being developed there. Overseas, there's just such a demand for talent. And, you know, I'm just a sales guy, but I'm sure Jeff and Sam can really talk to that. It's incredible.
And
We're in a great time for this.
this is a great transition to Jeff, but I know like Adobe has a program where like they have like a synergy type of program where like professionals and designers are able to work as a group like remotely. But I guess a lot of studios and designers and artists and animators are finding creative ways to find and transfer or work together remotely. And so we'd love to hear sort of your process during, I guess, during the pandemic.
Well, for us, I can't believe we were able to. I'm Jeff Fassner, by the way. I work for a production company here in Atlanta, Georgia, called Floyd County Productions. I'm one of the director producers, so I'm kind of touching a little bit about numerous projects. And COVID hit, and I can't believe I've been working from this tiny office in my house for a full year now. I never have had the luxury. Actually, prior to working and being hired at Floyd County Productions, my last gig was with Awesome Inc. As a freelancer, because I come from a commercial background. Actually, let me back up and tell me. Well, frankly, I have a very similar. I have a very similar story as Sam in that I'm an animation director who never had an animation course in my life. I originally, I've always been an artist. I've been doodling into sketchbooks, and I always thought I would be a Charles Schultz, not a, Walt Disney. So I'd already made panel cartoons when I was a kid, but I sort of fell out of that, and I went to school to be a graphic designer, and I sucked. So I didn't have I just didn't have, graphic arts is so much more difficult than you think. I just didn't have the flavor for that. And so then I went over to illustration for a while. I was trying to went to art school for 2 years and was working in illustration when I just decided to say, screw it, I'm gonna take some time off. I took some time off, lived around the country for a long time, a couple of years. And then when I went back to university, I decided I had my art degree, but I was going to look at an art degree, but I kind of wanted something bigger, more well-rounded university. I wanted to explore. And accidentally I fell into the theater, and I got my degree as an actor director. So I worked, I graduated from school I'm from the Twin Cities, Minneapolis, St. Paul. And I graduated from a small college there called Mankato State. And my degree is in acting, directing, with a minor in art. And it was fine arts, so I was taking more of fine arts too while I was there. I was acting for maybe 4 years in Minneapolis and making a really good living because it's a big regional theater district. So lots of theater everywhere. So I was, but I'm an actor, so I'm going to have to wait tables for the day, during the day. So while I was acting at night, I was waiting tables during the day, and I met a woman that was on my lunch shift whose brother worked for a place called Star Tunes in Chicago. And they were doing, at that time, they were doing Tiny Toons, Animaniacs. I guess Animaniacs now comes out. Sometimes I talk about these things and students don't remember what those are. But he was working for, shows that I remember liking and in my college days when I would, tune into animation. And I thought it was an interesting way to sort of take my art, take my theater, and kind of put it together, because acting, animation is acting with a pencil. Well, not a pencil anymore, it's a stylus these days. But I was still, I come from old school animator, so I was drawing on paper, flipping and drawing and flipping. Actually, my first freelance gig was painting cells. So we were painting cells to get them, shot at a studio way across town. So this was back in Minneapolis. So I started my career as an animator going, I found this, I went to this friend of mine's brother's studio, and he offered to intern me for a while. So I freelanced, interned with him for a bit, and then finally some jobs started to come in. So I started to help. And then I started to get a little bit of money, and eventually I got, I got enough experience and reputation in Minneapolis that I was able to sort of freelance during the day in animation and still keep acting at night. And a friend, the same guy who had taught me animation, moved down here to Atlanta and said, "Hey, we've got a job if you want to come down here." And so I thought maybe I'll take this as a sign to do it full time. And I came down here and I was working in commercial work. So I did old school. I worked for, doing a lot of early Cartoon Network bumpers, stuff that would, obviously Turner's down here in Atlanta. So I was working for a lot of Turner stuff. So I come from sort of, working on all the characters I used to grow up with, which was great too, and drawing Scooby-Doo and Bugs Bunny and Dexter's Laboratory and Powerpuff Girls, that kind of thing for the early, remember the checkerboard Cartoon Network era? I was part of the team that was doing, the actual branding of that with a company down here called Primal Screen. So I was doing commercial, and started to get into even Cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs bought this house for me. So I was even doing, commercial animation for the ad world, but eventually was looking for something a little bit more full-time, and the ad work started to dry up for me, frankly, in various places. So on a whim, I got hired to work on a new show they were doing over at another local animation house that's no longer here. But at the time, Floyd County, it wasn't Floyd County quite yet. Actually, it might have been Floyd County, but there was like 5 people in the business at that point. They hired another local animation house, Radical Access. And I worked, they hired me as, I was actually hired, I thought, as a storyboard artist. And I got over to Radical Access and they plugged me down in front of a dual monitor and said, no, you're animating, because Archer was and still is animated in an old school fashion. Although we're a Harmony studio at these days, we still produce Archer with Illustrator assets that we build and rig in After Effects, and then we animate it there. Now, you could tell as the series evolved, and we got to use Flash and Harmony and those more hands-on digital animation tools, that we were able to do more of the fight scenes, more of the the makeout scenes, anything that needed a little bit more dimension, and needed a little bit more freedom to work in than just being a simple puppet that you move around. So we, but to this day, we're still making Archer that old school way. It's just everything else we do in the studio now, we work in Toon Boom Harmony. I was gonna show our reel. Can I share screen? Do you want to? Just because I know you know us through Archer. I started with the company on the very first episode of Archer, and have been happily involved in the show for the last. We are on our 12th season, and I've got an Emmy in my bookcase to prove it. Oh. But I would love to share and just throw our yeah.
Yeah. You have my blessing.
Do it.
Oh. I'm recording this. May I have your blessing to share it?
Oh, absolutely. It's just our reel. I'm trying. Oh, is that how I start the broadcast? 2, 1. Okay. Let me see if I can find. So you're seeing my. This is the reason also I couldn't show you Storyboard Pro, because I'm on my iPad.
Apache, helicopters, we should sell those, cause I'm a rapper. Ho, ho, ho. Tonto, jump on it, jump on it, jump on it. Apache, jump on it, jump on it.
Now, how do I get back to this? Stop. There we go. There we are. So you can see we're, much broader than an Archer sort of show. And thankfully FX has always been our cheerleader, our biggest cheerleader. So a lot of those things that you saw in there were probably short things that we did for other FX shows. We did a couple episodes of Fargo, just tiny snippets that they might have needed some sort of animation for. We did part of a whole episode of Always Sunny in Philadelphia with, where they were imagining Charlie Day was imagining, a day in the life, and that's kind of where the Up ripoff comes in at the end.
Mhm.
We did work for also other Amazon series, Goliath. We've done a couple of Goliath stuff. So we a lot of times while we're producing other full series, we'll do quick little short things that'll sort of get us out there helping either FX or any of the other streaming networks.
Sorry, Jeff. You
Yeah.
also, I also read that you also did work for Fargo. Is that?
Yeah,
Okay.
we did. Gosh, I'm trying to think. We did 2 episodes or 2 seasons. No, one season of Fargo. We also did Legion, the other FX series,
Wow. Okay.
which was that chalkboard piece in there. I don't know if you remember one of the episodes where he's in his psyche and the chalkboard comes to life. We did that chalkboard animation. So FX comes to us when they need a little something different for another one of their series. And then it's always a happy accident or happy coincidence, because then we're usually able to create a relationship with somebody over there in FX. So then they become a guest star on our show, or we talk about future projects with them. So, FX has been a great collaborator with us, and we are still currently working on, at the moment, we've got 2 short form series that we're working on for FX's half-hour production called Cake. I don't know if you're aware of this, but FX is sort of an incubator of sorts. That's a little bit like it's a little bit like Adult Swim. I mean, it's an incubator, so it's live action and animation, and you can have anything from a minute to 5 minutes to 11-minute episodes of things. So we're doing multiple series with them at this point to sort of. They're always looking for something that they can kind of cultivate, make bigger, and so we're currently working on a little bit of that. We've got 2 series, one for Hulu and one for Hulu, and obviously Archer's in its 12th season. We just recently completed a movie that we basically produced a full feature film that will be streaming in the summer on Netflix, and we did it all from home. I think it took us 3 to 4 years to get an animatic together. But as far as when you're talking, we're now pencils in and full production. We did it in under a year and a half.
Wow.
For a 70-minute show. And this was actually thanks to Toon Boom and the gang to get me hooked up with multiple studios around the world. We've been learning the ins and outs of how to produce LA style, where you're working in one, you're doing the pre-production and a lot of the revisionists and all that stuff. It's done here in Atlanta, but the meat of the project could be shipped off other places. So we have gladly been working with studios in Brazil and Mexico and Canada. So it's been an interesting adventure on our end, because we are a IP driven, originally, sort of studio who really cut our teeth on our own product. So it's also been interesting to be working with multiple other producers and other directors and other people bringing in information that, we're used to being able to make the decisions, and now you have all the cooks in the kitchen. So yeah, that's sort of, I did want to say, as you can see in what, just sort of gearing back towards, starting out and getting into the business, is that as far as your, portfolio and resumes go, it is generally absolutely your best work goes on your portfolio. I think that I find that sometimes I'm looking at a portfolio, but then I find their work in Twitter and I'm like, why are you hiding that? I get that, you might spread it around, but keep it where I can, I'm kind of a recruiter as well for the company a lot of times. So it's helpful to be able to have one space to see what what's out there so I can start, moving forward with people. And I personally like to see a touch of diversity. Now, I don't necessarily want to see backgrounds and storyboards and and multiples. I mean, I would look at what do you want to do and gear your portfolio towards there. But within that place, there's a multitude of styles and things you can sort of play with. So I love to see like character design, but then character design is a little bit more realistic. Character design that's a little bit more geared towards, I don't know, quadrupeds, or character design that is more fantastic. Find your niche, and then explore that a little bit more is what I want to see, because you can see that obviously we do multiple different styles and things all throughout. So it's helpful to be able to I can employ you pretty steadily if I can switch you if you're pliable and can move around from show or your style. And I would also always be forewarned that when you come about when you're talking to somebody in a studio about, especially at the very beginning, that you need to start low, and they're going to ask to test you. So you're going to have to give some free work up to be able to see if you're able to match what what they're after, what they're looking for. And that's, I mean, even our amazing studios who are producing multiple other projects, we'd ask to test them to see if they could get what we were after for our style of our movie, because our movie is going to be a little bit more of a it's a little bit of a hybrid harmony thing where it's part rigged, part traditional. So it's rigitional. No, so it's a little bit we had to make sure that you go in and out of this the same aspect of the software. So it's a lot of the times it's just like, and again, like well, I don't, Sam, was it Sam? Somebody was talking about how you weren't quite, oh no, Bernard, you weren't quite right for the team. This person was right for the team. This is all collaborative, what we do. So it is a must to be able to work together. It's
Sorry,
just,
Jeff.
yep.
We had an introduction for you. It was just
a
natural transition, but it's fine. It's fine.
Okay.
Just, we had an introduction for you. So we're not like forgetting you for anything. But I do have two questions from the audience. A lot of you mentioned graphic design. Would any of you have any advice in that field, even if it includes graphic design work for the animation studios?
Oh, I jumped ship really early. I'm gonna let Sam respond.
Actually, yeah, for me, like graphic design, it's I feel like once I started storyboarding, it really, all the camera, like cinematography rules, like the camera flip rule and all that kind of stuff, it really clicked for me once I thought of storyboarding more as graphic design than I thought of it as cartooning, because like the joy of mini comics and zines and comic books is like, it could really be anything, but storyboarding and making stuff for that's going to be animated, you really do have to like stick to some hard and fast rules, because you can't like analyze like a comic book panel like and orient yourself every time like it's just like images flashing at the screen. So you really have to, like, if they're like really simple concepts but really tricky once you start like boarding complicated scenes and tight spaces and stuff. But like if a character is looking screen left or whatever, that character has to continue looking screen left if you move the camera around for the whole scene. And there's things like that, and it's similar to graphic design in that way, where it's like you don't stretch type, you don't like, there's just like certain rules you don't do with graphic design unless you do it like very purposefully.
And there's rules you follow in design as well as in, it is about composition and layout and beauty and cinema. So storyboarding and animation in general. So all of your design principles that you use, especially that's drilled in your head for graphic design, can be spread all over both of those mediums.
Totally. Also, like refining, like think of like defining like a company down to a logo, like taking like a really complicated scene and saying like what's like the really important like meat of this that you want to show, like storytelling wise, to like move this, you only have 11 minutes to tell this episode story, like what's really important to like move the story forward.
And then I guess this is for all of our animator guests. I guess how long does the timeline typically go from having an idea to getting an animatic then to the final product?
Wow. That can go from, I mean, that's just almost, so I don't even know how to answer that, just because I've done it pretty quickly and succinctly. I mean, we can, these days I can produce an Archer episode from script to final in 9 to 10 weeks. I can, I'm trying to do we were in the middle of doing a pilot, and that can take up to 7 months, especially a pilot, because you're creating a world, you're starting from the ground up, so you have nothing. Archer at this point, I've got a crazy library, so we can build off of that and do it. So it's it all depends on how it's always a challenge, regardless. You're always going to spend your biggest amount of time and your most money on that pilot episode, because you're creating the foundation for the rest of the 10 episodes. So that one's always going to take much longer. And but this movie, for instance, it took us maybe 2.5 years just to get the story finalized. But again, there's multiple producers involved with it, and Netflix, and so everybody's got to recreate and re-envision down the road. And we don't want to throw a full team at it, because then you're throwing money out the window. So it was that small team for a good 2 to 3 years developing it until it was ready to be produced. So it's kind of all over the place. It can be really swift. It can take forever. I don't know. That was kind of a lame answer, but
No, that's great. Thank you. I guess we can transition to our next guest. Ian?
Yes, hello. Hi, everybody. I'm Dr. Ian Peters. I'm in the assistant professor in the communication department. I want to apologize for my ghost-like appearance. I've never Zoomed here at night before, and apparently I need another lamp. But it's my honor to introduce Ashley Kohler, and we'd like to thank you and everyone for taking such time out of your schedules for this. Ashley is the president and co-producer for Awesome Inc. And Awesome is a proudly certified woman-owned business based in Atlanta, Georgia. And they produce 2D and 3D animation, visual effects, motion design, mixed media productions, long and short form animations for networks, advertising agencies, brands, and music labels. And in addition to being president and co-producer, Ashley has also worked on notable shows like Squidbillies, Harvey Birdman, Attorney at Law, which thank you for that series. The reruns got me through grad school, Aqua Teen Hunger Force, and The Awesomes. So thank you very much.
Take myself off mute after all this time. Well, I don't know if that is my fault, but you have a little bit of a outdated bio for me, but that's okay. I'm actually the founder of the company, so I can tell you a little bit about that. And I'm also laughing at my ghostly appearance, so we're in the same boat. But hey, what can you do? I also completely over-prepared for this in a hilarious way, because I have this giant presentation that I've been like percolating. Do I use the whole time or not use? You did it too, Sean, and you didn't use it? That's hilarious. Well,
Oh,
I'm showing
that-
mine,
for that-
okay?
for that-
So
That slideshow that you wrote.
Sean can do it later after Ashley. We'll record it.
you can go back and so look, I'm going to share my presentation and you guys can just enjoy it. All right, here we go. Let's try this. I'm gonna talk some and show some stuff. I might move through it a little faster than I thought I would, but I thought I had to fill up a half an hour, and I don't, I love to hear myself talk, but not that much. Let's see. I'm gonna give this a try. Oop, wait. Boy, this is gonna be interesting. Okay, let's hope this works. Oh boy. I'm already failing. There's some order to this that I have to do. Share screen first. Let's try this. Share sound. Here we go. Okay, guys. Now. Okay. Okay. Now you can see it, right?
Mhm.
Okay. Okay, so you said a lot of this. I started the company with a co-owner back in 2006 and ended up buying him out of the studio years later. So the women-owned business part is comical. Sean, I was listening to you the entire time, but I also ran down the stairs and made dinner for my fourth grader while I was in the middle of the presentation and ran back up. So it has a lot, you know, I think we have a number of women in our audience from what I could tell. So you can do it all. You just have to work extra sometimes. And there are plenty of working men out there too. So I'm not taking anything away from those guys either. We started with promos and commercials, a lot like Jeff mentioned. I worked at Cartoon Network for many years. I studied advertising actually in school. I also am not an artist. I came up as a producer. So I was at Cartoon Network for 8 years, worked on a lot of projects with Jeff outside of this kind of thing. And as we were hearing before, it is a funny business once you get into it, and how things mix around, how you work over here in one capacity and how you go into another. I had an amazing job that I loved at the network, and I just got to this place after a while where I was ready for my next adventure. So I quit my job and I took a 3-month certificate course at Emory on being a small business owner and launched a studio. We were very small for quite a while, just doing promos and commercials, little kinds of campaigns, bumpers, menus, all kinds of stuff. And in 2011, I had this wild hair to add series to that, just longer versions of what we were doing. And I went out to the network. We had worked a lot with Adult Swim. I had a lot of connections there, you know, from being there and working with those guys for many years. I actually was at the network when we launched Adult Swim, when we launched Boomerang, when I was there and worked on the promo campaign for CartoonNetwork.com when it started. So I went to them and said, hey, what about some of these shows? They weren't totally happy with their situation with the studio they were working with on Aqua Teen and Squidbillies. So we started production on those two and ended up adding a third show after that. And now we're working on, we worked on the Harvey Birdman special. We didn't do Birdman the show. We did Birdman the special a couple years ago. And we're working on a spin-off of Harvey Birdman now called Bird Girl, which we're just finishing the last episode, and hopefully that's launching in April. We're really excited about it. It's a Toon Boom production. Like Jeff mentioned, a lot of our shows are done in historical technologies, because Squidbillies was started in Flash, so it's a Flash show. When we work on Aqua Teen, which we still do for commercials and promos, it's animated in After Effects. Our new series are animated in Toon Boom, so it just depends on the production we're working on. I will show you guys our demo reel. Hopefully this will work, and then I can talk a little bit more history. Let's see. Oh, okay, that didn't work at all. Here we go. Okay. I'm hoping that streamed okay. Did that work okay for everybody ish? um, so as I mentioned, we've got these kind of, it's not two divisions. It's hard to talk about it that way, but we've got we still run a series group working on shows. We have I'm trying to think of what we have in production right now. We have Squidbillies and Bird Girl are in production right now, and then we have a pilot that we're working on, and we have one other streaming series that we're working on, animated segments. It's live action and animated series that we're working on as well. I think that's it. So we typically have multiple long form productions in-house at one time, but they really run a gamut of styles. We one of our specialties is just a very different broad range of styles, and I think that's one of the things I love about the studio. We're not always after the same exact type of talent, and when you think of animation, you might think of one thing, but with us, it could really run a gamut. We worked on shows, and you can look on our website in this past year, called Machu Picchu and Tender Touches for Adult Swim. More lower budget productions than some of the other ones, but just a really different style, and different types of people work on those productions, and different types of artists. So in addition to that, we have this commercial group that works on music videos, promos, packaging, all kinds of things ad agencies bring in. And so I put together some different stuff from a couple of those types of projects, so you could see process. We could just talk about that. And that type of work is, again, completely different. We'll hire different artists to work on those kinds of projects. And the cool thing about it is we can blend from the departments in an interesting ways. Sometimes we use a traditional series background artist. Sometimes a traditional cell animator will step across from the shows, and then we'll have a motion designer, an After Effects designer that's working on it. And they kind of cross over. And right now, for instance, on Squidbillies, we have a dream sequence that we're using motion designers to conceive of and execute for that show, which is a very different traditional style of, not traditional animation, but it's a series animated show. So usually you wouldn't pull motion designers in on that project. So it's really fun to cross over, and it's fun for the artists because it mixes things up for them, and motion designers or the motion design team gets some series credits under their belt, and vice versa. So that's kind of fun. So this is a project that we worked on a few years ago, and it's on the site if you want to take a look at it. I pulled some of the longer clips out because I just thought it would be difficult to play through them. But in Marietta, some of you be familiar with it. There's a KFC franchise called the Big Chicken, and Wyden and Kennedy came to us because this particular franchise was renovating. They were doing a huge multi-million-dollar renovation to this Big Chicken, and they wanted to make a short film to talk about why the Big Chicken was closing for a year, and so that the fans wouldn't be sad. And it was a very strange and unique project for us to do, but we had a lot of fun with it. So this is part of the boarding process. And again, this is for a long commercial. We didn't understand or totally agree with them, but they wanted this to be 4 minutes long, this short film to tell these people what was going on. So these were part of our storyboards for it. And you can see kind of, again, just how these looked and what the quality level was like for a advertising agency board sequence. Now, I wrote down some notes from what you guys were asking earlier, and you were talking, Sam, about tight boards versus loose boards and that kind of thing, and it's really different per project, like you were saying. Sometimes they look like really thumbnail, really like stick figure thumbnail boards just to get framing and composition across. And then on the show we're working on now, we're almost shocked at how tight these boards are. They want the facial expressions to be the facial expressions going through to the animation team. And that to us is a tedious process. And if your board artist isn't if used to that level of detail in a board, that can be difficult. So we've had to go through a number of board artists to get that level of detail for the creator. So it has to do a lot with your client or your show creator as to what level of boards they'll accept. So I had that in mind and was thinking about that when you guys were asking. So these were the boards for this project. You can see how this played out. And then I had some design I included in here. These were all kinds of character designs we had for this main character, which were a lot of different designs. And on this particular project, it was really fun because our client, which was unusual, the ad agency, asked us what we thought. we presented a lot of designs and they said, which one do you like? And we sort of were silent for a minute because we were like, no one's ever asked us that before. We like this one. And this was our color exploration. And you can see where we ended up with the boy in the top corner there and how he evolved. And they really, really involved us in this process, which was a lot of fun for us. We used a very limited color palette for this, and you can see where that landed down in the bottom there. And it ended up, just working really well and being really pretty for this process. These were some of the background layouts that we did. And this is really fun. Let's see if it will play. I did a side-by-side of, this is the animatic, and then it'll pop from the animatic to side-by-side from the finished. Hopefully it's playing smoothly for you guys. Did that work? Yeah, okay. So again, as you can see, and I think these are all stages that you guys are all familiar with, going from your boards through your design process to your animatic and then to your final with comp. This was something we put together. This particular project, we used both After Effects, rigged After Effects characters, and then we also had cell animation for the characters in certain sequences so that you'd have both throughout and you could take advantage of both. So let's see if this will play. These were really complicated After Effects rigs. We used something called rubber hose for these rigs, and it was one of the more complicated sets of rigs that we've done on After Effects characters, but it ended up making them, obviously we were able to move them in ways that we weren't before, and worth the setup time. Okay, so that's Big Chicken, what I've pulled for that. So this is a totally different project, and this is a much shorter bit for you here. This one was called Evolving Thoughts. This was an ID for Adult Swim that we did years ago. And they come to us every year, every other year. And these are not big budget projects, but they sort of say, we'll give you this amount of money. You can just come up with something. The benefit of these is there's not a lot of back and forth. We just kind of come up with some idea, and generally chicken scratch it out. And they're like, okay, And after that, we don't really show them anything. We just kind of come up with it and go from there. So we've done a lot of these, and they've always been really fun for us to just think about, collaborate on. And again, it's a opportunity for our teams to kind of work together to come up with something interesting. So on this particular project, I love talking about this because this is really and truly what we showed to the network. I have to let my cat out of the room. 1 second. Okay. Sorry, she was really upset. Okay, so in this particular, we had one of our cell animators came up with this concept, and he's like, a guy's head opens up, and then this happens, and then this happens, and this happens, and this happens, this happens. Adult Swim. There's like a little flag with that. And we just are at this point with our relationship with them where we could say, okay. And so we showed this to them just like this. And they're like, okay, that sounds cool. And so that was it. So his drawing of the guy looked like this, which again, he's a cell animator. So his mind goes a little comic. So our design director was like, yeah, I get your idea, but maybe we can elevate it a little bit. So he comes back with a different design for the guy. They work a little bit together on how it should look. And then he starts thinking about composite, which again, I think is something people don't think about as much, and how important it is to a project, the compositor role. So these were the things that were on the table and what he was thinking about when we were thinking about where this could go, how it could look. You know, he had a zine style. Could it just be black and white ink over paper? Maybe this yellow spotlight idea. He even genuinely toyed around with like, maybe the whole thing just plays out on the front of a t-shirt. And then his last idea was this. He's like, what if it's kind of this glowy, ethereal kind of looking thing? And we all decided this was the look we should take. So this is how it ended up. Now, it was a true collaboration. The original animator who came up with that idea did that cell animation, and he did a beautiful job. But had it not been for the design director's influence, I would say some of my input and influence, and that beautiful piece of music, which I can tell you that my husband wrote, who's a fantastic sound designer and composer. He actually did the sound on the first 4 seasons of Archer, and is sound designing on the show that we're working on right now, Studio. He and I met when I was working at Cartoon Network, and I decided to start the studio. And I sent him a note and was like, "Hey, I heard you're thinking of going out on your own. Do you want to have lunch and talk about sharing studio space?" And then we started dating and sharing studio space, and now we've been married for a decade. So I get all my audio at a discount price. But anyway, so that project, you know, I guess is just a testament to collaboration in my mind. And a lot of these things are, you know, you can be super, super talented, but as one of these talented panelists mentioned before, it's about a team and trusting your teammates and looking at their skill sets and their you know, what they can bring to something. And if you look at a project like this, you can really realize that if you give, you know, you give up a bit of control, what the benefit can be and what you get back from it can a lot of times be kind of amazing. So we also luckily have this great relationship with FX and have worked with them a lot in the last couple of years, more on the promo side. They called us to do this project for the 4th-season launch of Baskets, and they had this really interesting idea of what they wanted to do and asked us if we could do it. And to be honest, I was like, I don't know if we can do that, but we can try to figure out if we can. Their thought process was they kind of wanted to do something surrounding Zach Galifianakis kind of riding this bullet train that was coming to town in this particular season. If you're familiar with the show, they gave us a lot of retrofuturism reference and a lot of talked through a lot of ideas of what they wanted to do. And so we started mocking some things up, working on different designs, and some of them were working, some of them weren't. And we ended up with this motion test. We had to pitch for the project. And there was something about this particular motion test that was resonating with them. And it wasn't quite it, but this was sort of, again, just something about it was resonating with them. It was a quick After Effects test that we did, but it earned us the project. And then from there, we started kind of getting down a path of what was next. So they shot Zach. We had a script, obviously, that we were working from, and they shot Zach and provided us with footage that we didn't have any input on, which is unusual because usually when you're trying to work with live action footage, you get to say, here's how you stage them, here's what you need to shoot them over, here's, the lighting. They just shot him and gave us the footage to work with. So from here, we took the footage and did sort of a loose rotoscope draw over. And then again, this was a process we had never done exactly before. We were trying to get to they wanted a very painterly look to this rotoscope. So then we basically did a shadow pass over the rotoscope that we did. And then my idea was to bring in a background painter, honestly, someone that was a very skilled background artist, to, instead of necessarily a traditional animator, but to paint each frame individually as a background, sort of. So that's how we approached it. And he did a beautiful job. And so we had a traditional cell animator doing the rotoscoping and filling in the blanks for the footage that we didn't have, because there were some shots that didn't have footage. Then we had the background artist go back and paint each frame cell by cell. So this is an example of the kind of notes that we would give to the different people on the team. Jeff might recognize some of the names. And this was how painterly these things, pieces were. I think this is the spot.
Hold on.
Baskets. Season premiere Thursday, June 13th on FX.
It was very funny to work on something for a month, 5 weeks, 6 weeks that was that short. I mean, it was like, wait, it's only 10 seconds long. But they were super happy. We were super happy. But it's so funny when you talk about the process, realize how much work we did, and then you play it, you're like, oh, wait a second, I forgot that that's only a 15-second spot. But that was the Baskets process. So that's the end of my big presentation. I can stop the sharing. Yay.
I want to hop in and say that, like, seeing like Ashley's reel and Jeff's reels, they're like so beautiful and awesome looking. And I feel like if I was just like a student watching that, I'd be like, well, yeah, dude, I can't do that. That's like crazy, But it really is just like a team of people, and like everybody has their strengths and weaknesses, and it's like it really is like attainable. And Yeah, it's like I'm not an employee of Cartoon Network. I'm just like this for hire artist, and people like choose me for the projects that I would be a good fit on. So everybody has their spot.
Well,
Well, and I would also go
oh,
back to just say about Brooke. I just wanted to reiterate what Brooke said earlier, in that was Brooke from Bento, right?
yeah.
Yeah, that you don't have to be an artist. There's so many facets of what we're doing that we need help with. So as long as your attention and your interest is here, it's a broad scope, from PAs to editors to sound people to musicians to artists, so writers. It's a wide field.
And I would honestly encourage you to consider all of that. I think when people are in school, especially when you're coming up, when you are getting into it, you're just thinking animator. And I don't totally understand why that is. But and I don't know about you, Jeff, but for us right now, one of the hardest roles to fill is compositor. People really don't think about it. They don't know about it. And for some reason, I don't know that they think about it as glamorous as being an animator. But I would really encourage you to consider it, because it's hard for us to fill those jobs. There's lots of people looking for animation or animator roles. There are not as many people and I wouldn't even call them support roles: setup, layout, rigging, compositing. People are very, very much gravitate towards storyboarding and animating. Because for whatever reason, and I understand that, I think they see those as the spotlight roles, but I'm telling you, design, all layers of design, and the setup roles, the composite roles, everybody's equal on those playing fields. I mean, when you're in the studio, everybody's equal, and there is a ladder to climb within each department. So we have heads of all of those departments. You have a lead compositor, you have a lead background artist, you have a lead setup artist, you have a lead rigger, you have, so it's not, I don't totally understand why, if you're sort of like going out for animation and you end up in as a rigger, character rigger or setup person, you're like, oh, I failed. You shouldn't look at it like that. In my opinion, you're smart to choose one of those paths, because you have a way better shot at getting a job faster. It's just a narrower set of people going out for those roles. That was going to be one of my pieces of advice, in fact, is it. And also just, I think for whatever reason, I don't know, this might sound harsh, I don't know that everybody is as self-aware as they should be about their talent and their skill level. And if you love animation and you want to be part of it, I totally support that. But I can speak from experience. I was in school and I was studying art. I thought I wanted to be an art major, but I was just self-aware. Like, I took a look around and I realized that I was not going to be able to draw for a living. But I had a passion for this type of work. And so I just looked at the path ahead of me and I tried to evaluate what my skill sets were. And I think there is a path for everybody, but being smart about what your path is and taking a look at similar portfolios and websites and that sort of thing to what you're choosing is being really smart. And going to your professors and your educators and saying, like, I need an honest answer here. Like, do you see a path for me here? Or should I choose something like this or this or this? There are so many roles to fill, like we're saying. Everyone's not going to be an animator, and that's okay. There's lots of other paths to choose. I would highly encourage you guys to consider some ancillary training that you may not think about. It sounds crazy, but communication skills, there's tons of things about that kind of courses that you can take on your own. And I know it sounds nuts, but look, you're entering into a big team environment, and we do a lot over Slack. We do a lot of that kind of just quiet communication. But again, if you are hoping in your future path to grow in your role, it's talking to leads, it's talking to directors, maybe even clients at some point. And the people at the table who can communicate well, understand feedback, give notes on things, hopefully as they grow in positions, are the ones that are going to progress faster. Someone that's artists, not always, but artists in general can be introverts sometimes. So finding your way out of that through just some tips and tricks would help you set yourself apart. Color theory is another one that I think gets skipped over, especially for some of these design projects. There's just additional things that you guys can do to set yourselves apart just a little bit.
Acting classes is another one.
Cinematography classes. And again, all these things you can just take a YouTube tutorial or see if you've got extra things at the university that you can audit or things like that. Ask Ian, is that what you're saying? Ask Ian.
Yes.
Where you can, add those things to your course load, because I think all of those things would really help you. And I know it sounds crazy, but if you're going out for a job and you're like, by the way, I took communication courses, I took a negotiation class, I have color theory, I added this, it would stand out because we don't get a lot of that.
So,
and if I may, Ashley, to that point, that is something that is in demand globally. Everyone keeps focusing on animation, and whether in Vancouver or Tokyo, they need riggers and all those ancillary jobs to run the project, to run the studio. So yeah, I will echo that very loudly.
if I may,
Well,
should we get our act together, and let's say we move from studio art to animation and game design as a program, as its own program, which would be years down the road. We can start baby steps. We can do it in studio art right now, but once it's its own program, it's a blended program, and we would have both studio art and communications classes built in side by side.
And I want to thank Ashley for speaking that advice, because we have students who always nothing against Disney, but that's like their goal. They want to be a 3D animator for Disney. And I was like, well, there's other voices out, other perspectives, and
Absolutely.
you
Yeah,
open up your eyes. And then, but so thank you so much for bringing up that word of advice. So I appreciate it.
absolutely. Yeah, there are so many, and I think Sean even mentioned, like, I know this is no childhood dream, but medical animation, there are a zillion pathways. And I think it's just being sort of, again, self-aware, honest with yourself about your path, and it can always lead somewhere. What I'm finding, especially today, and I don't know, Jeff, you can maybe back me up, all you guys. When I got out of school, I wasn't necessarily like, I'm going to work for Disney today. Like today, if I don't get this job, I'm a failure. I think there's a lot of pressure put on you guys when you're coming out right now, that if you don't go from 0 to 60, then that's it. It's definitely a road, it's a path, and you guys should take the pressure off yourselves and understand that the path can be somewhere very small and lead to somewhere very big and very different. Speaking of medical animation, I mean, I work with a guy, I've worked with a guy a lot over the years that started out doing architectural animation and medical animation, and he's wiggled his way over to working a lot on the Elf on the Shelf series and features now. He didn't start there, but that's what he's doing now, and I think he's even directing some of that stuff. It's just, you don't know where your path is going to lead, but I certainly, I started out answering telephones, and my dream job out of college was not answering the telephone for, as a receptionist or a secretary, but I took a job at Turner answering the phone for a VP because it was sort of the first step on my path, and it led somewhere else. And I think taking your first step can be lots of different things, and you should take the pressure off yourself if it's not working, at Pixar. That's okay. It could be all kinds of different things. Getting that experience and building your portfolio and having a paycheck, like Sam said, waiting tables while you're working on your portfolio or on your own project, that's okay. So yeah, I mean, I think there's tons of different kinds of animation out there, and all of it is fine. All of it is good. We have a zillion types of things on our website, and they're all different, and it takes all different kinds of people to do all that kind of work.
Okay, that was going to be one of my questions, is for new recruits for job applications for Awesome Inc. and Floyd County Productions. Are both of those on your websites?
Yep, it's just you go to our site and there's just a thing at the top that says careers, and it's all right there.
Yep, same with us. Just go to the pull down, and we list what we're actively hiring at the time. But generally, somebody's looking at this work generally every off and on continually. So even if you don't see what you're after, it doesn't hurt to throw your reel at us, your portfolio at us, even then, because I store everything.
I will tell you that some things that will get you automatically eliminated because there are things. Don't send us a demo reel that's on YouTube. Like, just send us a resume and a YouTube link. For whatever reason, it's sort of like, we see that as you're not really that serious about what you're doing. Like if you have a Wix site that's not, that's got a bunch of ads and, things like this, it should look professional. It should look like and I understand that there's an investment that you make in that. You have to pay for these things to have a portfolio site. But I think there are Adobe, Vimeo, there's some ways that you can do it that don't look like it's a hobby. So make it look real. And I agree with Brooke about emails. You would be shocked. I know it doesn't sound real, but you would be shocked at some of the emails that we get. Like smokeadoobie3000.com. And you're like, that's not, please, no. Or, we'll find a portfolio that we want, but I can't get in touch with you. You don't write me back, or I have to fill out a form. Make it look professional and make it easy for me to get in touch with you, or we'll just skip right over that one.
Like you want to work there.
Be like you want to work at our studio.
Oh, and also, Ashley, thank you for justifying the foundation classes. We get a lot of students who ask, like, why do we have to take color, or why do we have to take?
Can I spend one more minute justifying them, please? I will talk about this all day long.
Just to
hear me now and hear me later. Don't skip over them. Don't sleep through them. Don't ignore them. Don't think that they're not important and be like, I want to make things move. Forget this stuff. I can't tell you how many people we see that don't believe in. I wrote them down. I wrote down color theory. I wrote down these things because there's a reason they're teaching you this stuff first. I almost wish it came at the end so that it really would sink in for you guys. We'll go to schools and sit with students, and they'll walk out after an interview, and I think they never took a class on composition, or they never took a class on these things. They're so focused on is making stuff move. But yeah, there's a reason that cinematography and color theory, and that you learn those foundation classes first. Pay attention in them. It's hugely important.
And be okay to make mistakes. You're going to learn a lot more from your mistakes than you are from your successes.
Be ready for criticism, because that's going to help you grow as an artist. You're working on a project, you're listening to the instruction, and you're going to be criticized. Everybody goes through it. Every job goes through it. Accept it, adjust, and move forward.
I will say that once I started in animation, it was kind of tricky to be that like team player and be that super collaborative, because like, as you all know now, I'm like pretty bad at talking and explaining my ideas. I'm much more of a visual person. but yeah, it's like even after working like these big teams, it kind of made me appreciate like my own personal work even more. You know, it's like I can go home and draw my own comics and I don't have to worry about like network notes and like director's notes and all this stuff. So I feel like as long as you keep your portfolio like stuff that you actually enjoy doing also, like I feel like that really comes through, like your passion. And if you, it really shows if you're like, this person liked when he like made this storyboard, he's not just like doing this to like fill out, you know, his portfolio.
So let's see. Yeah. Well, I just want to thank everyone taking the time out of life and work just to speak with us today. It's just a huge honor and privilege just to hear everyone's advice and knowledge. Um, be sure to, we'll be sending out an email to you all to thank and some questions. But thank you all, and also thank you for all the students and participants who asked questions and who attended. We appreciate you all, and thank you.